Hello, my name's Amanda. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about psychic self-defense, psychic protection. And this will be a bit of a longer one. And if you clicked on this, you probably have a reason to want to know everything you can about this topic. And I suggest grab a pen and paper and anything that jumps out at you personally where you're like, I could use that. I'm missing that in my tool belt. Make a note for yourself. So there's going to be a lot in here, and take what resonates and leave the rest. I'm going to share a little bit about some of my own experiences of needing psychic protection and what led me to dive into this and find out what works for me. So we'll just jump right in. Many of you guys know, if you watch this channel, that as a young child, age 3, 4, I could see entities in my room. It was a very frightening situation. I grew up in a religious household, and I was very alone in that. And in the years that followed, up until about at age 8, I stopped being able to see these things around age 4, but I could still feel their presences in certain places, certain homes, certain rooms up until when I was 8, and I lived in sheer terror. I also had a great fear of hell and demons and other things that I had heard of through the church, thought that I was evil, all kinds of stuff. So my life, for whatever reason, there was a springboard into this topic. So I'm coming at it from a place of experience, a place of love, and a place of continually being a student. So I'm going to reference a few great teachers and experiencers throughout here, one being Dion Fortune. She wrote an amazing book called Psychic Self-Defense. It's brought through a lot of great, really practical, but serious ways of understanding this realm of reality that is all around us, but we can't see with our physical eyes. And if we have super sensible abilities, we can feel it at times. Some of us can see things at times, or at least notice them in our third eye. And there are many reasons for this, which we'll get into in the video, why some people are super sensing to these things and some people aren't. It doesn't really matter the reason. It's not one is better than the other. What is important is that you do have senses into these regions of reality to understand how to create your own sovereignty, your own personal space. And I believe strongly through experience that the more that we have boundaries with other human beings, the more we have boundaries with people in our relationships, the more we have boundaries in these psychic realms, the more we have protection from having our field invaded by other thought forms or other entities or other experiences that are unwanted. So it's not said enough that as within, so without. But if you are able to have strong boundaries with other humans, you are light years ahead when it comes to having boundaries in the super sensible realms. And I'll probably repeat that a few times throughout this because it's just really the basis. If we are really permeable to other people's suggestions, other people's opinions, being influenced by other people, being gaslit, we are way more vulnerable to thought forms and forces that we can't see when we're in a vulnerable state. So jumping into some of Dion Fortune's work to start off, and when it comes to, psychic protection, this isn't just like, oh my goodness, there's a nightmare coming after me. Oh my goodness, I'm sensing dark forces in my house. Like, that's real and that's a big part, but it can be as subtle as thought forms, unwanted thought forms, intrusive thoughts, a really loud and ongoing and relentless inner critic and intrusive thoughts is one way that this can show up. It doesn't mean that we're being attacked. We don't have to be frightened of anything like that, but we are permeable and we have thin boundaries if we're experiencing things like that to the field around us. And so in this video, we're going to talk about changing that, about building the strongest ever psychic body, subtle body that there is, so that if something doesn't belong to us, it's not a match for us. It can't get in. So there will be techniques that I'll talk about to use like in an emergency, in a pinch, if you're just, you're just drowning in it. But we want to prevent getting to that point. And there's lots of teachings and videos on techniques and visualizations, and that's all great. But I think that a huge chunk of it really is building up a super strong psychic body that keeps the majority of this stuff out. So Dion Fortune says, there is a peculiar horror, an insidiousness with potency that can have disastrous effects on the body and disastrous effects on the mind. And we don't want to talk about these things if this is us, because we have little likelihood of being believed or understood. And when we talk about things like that, we are more likely to earn a reputation for mental imbalance than anything else. So I relate to that statement big time. Often we carry the heaviness of intense psychic experiences all on our own in isolation. There are beings that live in the invisible world around us just the same way as fish live in the sea. This is a reality. And there are times when these forces do break through into our reality, whether it's through intrusive thoughts, or whether it's through nightmares, or whether it's just through other ways of sensing them. Normally this does not occur, and we are protected by our very incapacity to see them. And there are five. There are 5 ways that we can find ourselves in a position to sense these forces in one way or another. So it's important to kind of know what makes us a little bit more vulnerable to them. Number 1, we might find ourselves in places, locations where there's a concentration of these forces. I'll give you an example. I lived in this jungle community in Mexico, on Mayan burial land, I found out later. And it was not uncommon for people staying there, myself included, to have visits from entities. And they weren't actually bad entities. I'll tell you a quick story. I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and there was these very tall beings, like as tall as the ceiling. And they looked like stone carvings, but they were alive. And I was like, that's something to wake up to, right? I said, what's going on? There was like an energy, like a fast moving electricity in the room. And they said, we're the Toltec beings. This is our land. And we want to welcome you to our land. And it was, I just get chills talking about it. It was very unexpected. And I didn't even know who the Toltecs were. I had to do a little bit of research. And I found out after living in this jungle community for a while that other people were visited by some of the ancestors of the land. And so we can sometimes in life, especially if we're sensitive to these things, find ourselves in a location where we are able to, for a split second or for moments, access the beings, interface with the beings in other realms. We may meet people, this is number 2, we may meet people who are handling these forces. This is particularly true if we are going to ceremonies of some sort. Plant medicine ceremonies, maybe sweat lodge. There are people, shamans, medicine men, medicine women, who use these forces as allies for healing, in a good case. And then, there are darker forces that some people who have dark intentions use as well. So if we've been in touch with these types of human beings, we might have been in touch with forces that they are handling. Number 3, we may ourselves go out to find the unseen. So we might go out on a vision quest. We might go and, use some type of plant medicine on our own. And that can be risky if we are not experienced and we don't know how to build a safe container. But some people go out to meet forces unseen on their own. Number 4, we may fall prey to certain pathological conditions that thin the veil. We may fall prey to certain pathological conditions that thin the veil. This is probably the most common. Highly sensitive people who are living in Western society being bombarded by media and frequencies from electricity, other human beings who are mentally unwell. If we don't have a very strong constitution, we are going to be affected by their thought forms. We are going to be affected by ideas from media. And that is just the case. So we can fall prey to being influenced by forces or entities, having our space invaded by other ideas that are not so lovely, just through a regular mental pathological way when our aura is weakened. And that is just a fact of living in this day and age for sensitive people. And then number 5, a man who has, or a woman who has been exalted by ritual, who cannot seal his aura afterwards, is open to psychic invasion. And I have experienced this as well. So I went to an ayahuasca retreat with people that I didn't know very well. It was probably a mistake, many lessons learned. So not really a mistake, but the people who were facilitating that ceremony did not seal the aura. So when we open ourselves in ritual, when we open ourselves in ceremony, we are opening a portal between our realm and the unseen. And while we're in the ceremony, we usually have protection. But we want to have that portal, that opening, closed down and sealed. We want our aura to get sealed afterward from somebody who knows what they're doing, so that we can go back out in the regular world and we're not wide open. And I spent actually months walking around not understanding why my crown chakra was wide open. The nerves in the top of my head were freezing cold all the time. It was very uncomfortable. I had very invasive dreams and nightmares, very open to the collective unconscious in a bad way, until I found somebody who named what was going on and showed me how to close my crown chakra and seal it off. But this should be done by anybody who knows what they're doing in a ceremonial space. So sometimes we are open to invasive forces because we've elevated ourselves through some type of ritual or ceremony and we haven't been closed down properly. Okay, so we must not make the mistake of thinking that all beings and entities in the invisible realm are harmful or out to hurt us. If you've grown up in fundamental Christianity like me, we come to believe that everything's an angel and everything's a demon, and most things are demons. And so we can have like extra fear that just kind of attracts fearful entities towards us. But the truth is there's all kinds of different forces and spirits and beings around us all the time. And again, we are protected by our incapacity to see them. But we must not make the mistake to think that they are all evil or harmful to humanity, or that they are out to attack us. And the most common form of psychic invasion or psychic interruption comes from the malignant mind of our fellow human beings, or our own mind itself here in the West. So in parts of the world tribal parts of the world where a lot more magic and psychic forces are being used regularly, they have their own set of issues. But here in the West, most of our issues actually just come from thought forms that are malignant from other people or ourselves. We might be responsible, if we have ongoing negative thought forms about other people, for actually creating invasions into their field if their aura isn't strong enough. So that's really what we want to be aware of, as well as I would include the media. I would include the media in that if we don't have a healthy relationship and boundaries with media. So not all invasions are deliberate. It could just be that we need to strengthen our aura. We need to strengthen our subtle body, our psychic body, so that we're experiencing less invasions. We should never respond attack to attack. That's just bringing us down to another level. If we feel like we're being attacked, we might want to attack back, but we need to rely on more humane responses, which we'll touch on later in this video, so that we're not bringing ourselves down a level. So when we are not in our normal state of body, when we're not in wellness, we're much more vulnerable to things like nightmares, to intrusive thoughts, or even imagery that's unwanted. First, we will notice maybe some fear or some oppression. And that's just kind of like our spidey senses sensing that something's coming along that's going to be invasive, and then it builds, and then we are experiencing something invasive after that. So Dion Fortune talks about having a strong sealed aura, a strong sealed psychic body, because until that is pierced, until that has holes or vulnerabilities in it, there is no entrance from anything outside that can disturb or harm us. And that's why later in this video, we're going to talk a lot more about prevention and building up the psychic body, so that the majority of this stuff is just a non-issue. The aura is pierced from within, so we can pierce it ourselves through a response of fear. So sometimes we are our own worst enemy. If we can stand firm in the face of fear, we can keep our aura impenetrable, and it will be a sure defense, like healthy skin protects from a bacterial infection. And so a lot of times this kind of stuff is just parasitic. It's just parasitic. It's not trying to kill us. It's not trying to harm us. It's literally parasitic and looking for kind of like a vulnerable mind, a vulnerable aura to come and set up shop kind of thing. It can't hurt. These kind of beings, lower astral beings, can really only shock us and scare us. Beyond that, there's really nothing they can do. So our job is to build up safety in our life, build up boundaries in our life, so that we're just not a match for them, so that they're going to move on and find somebody more vulnerable. And this comes back to having healthy boundaries with other humans, having healthy boundaries with media. And as we do that, that is one big way of building up our psychic body and our aura. And that will be the beginning of our sure defense. Nighttime. People who experience these kind of difficulties often suffer at nighttime. I know that has been true for me. Why is that? Well, nighttime, Dion Fortune talks about that time magnetizing. There's a magnetism that charges up in the night, a kind of a psychic magnetism. In the day, it might seem as though it's not there, but you will feel differently when it comes to the nighttime. And so those are the times that we really want to create as much safety and quiet and silence and serenity in our home as possible. We want to eliminate harmful media. We want to have, comfortable clothing and soft lighting and a decluttered house and, maybe a hot bath, these kinds of things. When we're taking good care of ourselves, we are not becoming susceptible to our lower nature, which kind of puts us more in touch with having a bit of an invasion going on. And so there's this talk about, negative entities and demons and this kind of thing. And like, what is that? Who is that? What's out there? Well, there's a variety of stuff going on, just like there's a variety of physical stuff going on. There's humans and there's animals and there's plants and there's insects. And in the invisible world around us, we have, we have thought forms first and foremost. And I think that's what affects people the most in general. We have thought forms of other people. I can tell you that personally, when I've been in a really low place and I've been kind of like harassed by thought forms, I've had times where it's been nighttime. I feel absolutely horrible. I've been dealing with anxiety, and then I can almost hear the voice of somebody else talking about me and see their face as though they're right in my room, and I've got no boundary from that. And, looking back, how did that happen? Maybe I was talking about that person behind their back. Maybe I was focusing on them or comparing myself to them or in some sort of mindset of competition to them in my own mind. And what that does is that kind of opens a portal towards that other person's consciousness. And so if that person has any type of malevolent feeling towards you or is talking about you negatively, then you're going to be experiencing some type of psychic invasion of thought forms. And so that's why we have to take such responsibility with the quality of our thoughts and what we're talking about. What are we inviting in? So thought forms are a big one. again, from the media, what we're taking in, we're basically creating a hypnotic portal when we're watching anything or listening to anything. And so if we're sensitive, we've got to really take really good care when it comes to that. We have parts of deceased human beings. So, without getting too into detail, when somebody dies, obviously their physical body is cremated or buried into the earth. Then we have layers of the subtle body. We have layers of the subtle body, and our closest layer to the physical body is our etheric body. And that is a lot of energy that's like throughout our life is with us, and it's intermingled into our cells and our tissues, and it helps animate us. It helps connect us to the higher bodies. And that part, that etheric part, contains some thought forms, contains some energy, and sometimes it can take a while to disintegrate. It can take a while to break down, and the thought forms and the energies that were part of a deceased person's etheric body can still be kind of floating around the atmosphere. And that's where we get the phenomenon of ghosts or disincarnate human beings. It's not their soul, it's not who they really are. Our soul, our astral body, our I, that moves beyond, into the astral realm and through higher realms beyond death. But that etheric body that still contains different magnetisms and forces and energy can still be breaking down. So we can be affected by that if we are kind of feeling affected by the invisible realm around us. So there can be a deceased person's etheric body that's still disintegrating, and we can, pick up on that. And it might frighten us if we see or have a phenomenon from a ghost or a disincarnate being, but it's not really them. It's just parts of their energy that have been left behind. There are energies, that are old, honestly, like old primitive energies that are at work on Earth. There are the energies from the 4 elements, like earth, water, fire, air. There are elementals, the spirits of plants and animals that are like not good or bad. They just are what they are. And so it's more important than trying to identify what's bothering me, what's bugging me. It's like, how is this making me feel? How is this affecting me? Do I need to have some type of help from a healer or a shaman to help clear my body and then learn what made me vulnerable to this negative thing in the first place? But just to know that it's just like there's many fish in the sea around us. For the most part, we can't notice them until we're in kind of a low, kind of nervous, neurotic, depressed state. But the entities that are around us are from all different things. But for the most part, they're not really trying to harm us. They just have a beingness of their own in their own realms. So teacher Kat Courtney talks about entities. It's important to normalize the experience. So we can get ourselves really frightened, or we can get frightened hearing the stories of other people, but it's actually really normal, especially amongst people who have super sensible abilities or empaths. It's actually something to normalize. So we want to kind of wonder, okay, if I'm getting bothered by something that's non-physical, what do I do? What do I need to do to purify myself, to cleanse myself? What needs to be changed in my life so that I'm no longer a match for this? This goes for people too. If you're attracting a certain type of person that's not so great, it's like, okay, what needs to change? What do I need to do in my life to shift things, to shift myself so that I'm no longer a match for this? And we want to remind ourselves, how did I feel before this invasion of energy? Who was I? I want to envision the bright version of myself before I was dealing with this invasion of energy, and use that as a North Star. That's where I'm headed back to. We don't always know what the entity is. We don't always know exactly why it's in our field, but we can choose to focus on elevating ourselves and taking better care of ourselves so that it's not a match for us. It's serving us somehow, or it wouldn't have come to us. There are no mistakes in the universe, and often there is something that we need to learn from it. And so often it's We're learning what part of us was vulnerable to it. We're learning which part of ourself we were not taking care of. We're learning where we didn't have boundaries. And that is how these entities can be a teacher for us. How do we know if we're dealing with one? Well, there is an experience of something is invading my space. These thoughts aren't mine, these dreams aren't mine. Something is invading my space. That's kind of how we know that there's something going on. And yeah, some entities are part of our life force. So there have been times, I can speak from personal experience, where it's like, oh, there's this part of me that I want to cleanse. There's this part of me that I need to like remove, cast out, cut off. It's dragging me down, this is no good. Sometimes it's kind of like this. It's like, imagine you had like a wound on your arm. Would you cut your whole arm off because you had a wound on your arm? No, sometimes it's a matter of tending to it. Sometimes it's like holding a screaming baby. Sometimes that thing that's bugging us is actually part of our life force. It's not something to cleanse out of us. It's literally something to take care of. And we know that that's the case, where that thing that's bugging us so much, when we give it some time and we give it some love and some attention, and we treat it like a baby, we treat it like an inner child, it starts to get quieter and it's less of an invasive, loud experience. That's how we know that's actually just a part of our life force that needs love. It's not something that we need to protect ourselves from. And with practice, we start to be able to know the difference. So these are some really practical things. We're going to start with practical, and then we're going to kind of like move into the more esoteric. But I say practical because we have to build up our aura. We have to build up our subtle body so that the majority of things really don't affect us. This is hard work. This is everyday work. But without this, it's way more easy to have invasions if we're in a low place. So Joshua Michael Schrey, he talks in his teachings on guardianship that we need to guard by the following things. We need to guard by not identifying with our thoughts. Not identifying with our thoughts. This is really big, especially if we're getting invasive thoughts. And it's easier said than done, but you can do this. Sometimes when I've had really invasive thoughts, I've had to be like, well, that's not true. Well, that's not true. And it sounds crazy because it sounds like I'm talking to myself, but it's like, well, that's a lie. No, that's not true. And I've had to kind of like go through sessions, like minutes long sessions, where I've had to like notice these invasive thoughts and then like speak that they weren't true in order to reroute them. It's hard work sometimes. Okay, so we want to avoid identifying with our thoughts. We want to avoid stewing and ruminating. So if something's bothering you and it feels like you're starting to ruminate, you want to switch up what you're doing. You can always come back to it later, but you want to leave the room. You want to like start cooking, go for a walk, turn on some music. We don't want to ruminate, because what ruminating does is it starts creating thought forms, especially when those thoughts are thought over and over. We create relational architecture in the invisible realms with those thoughts as they become thought forms. So avoiding stewing and ruminating. Sleeping properly. This is a huge one for me. I am an advocate of being weird when it comes to self-care. My self-care, in order for me to feel like I'm in homeostasis, is very extreme. I don't even talk about it too much out loud because I don't want people to think that they've got to do what I do. But you know what puts you in homeostasis. But proper sleep, like there are days where I will go to bed before midnight. I'll sleep until like 12 or 1 p.m. I'll get up for a couple hours, and then I'll sleep again at the end of the afternoon for a couple hours. Sometimes our bodies, when we're processing a lot of energy, when we're doing a lot of psychic processing, they need a lot of sleep. We put our subtle bodies through the ringer with this kind of work sometimes. So proper sleep is big. Regular clearing. So when it comes to sticky feelings, track the feeling, hear the story, and let it go. That's it. and that goes back to not ruminating. Track the feeling and then take from it what you need to, do any kind of like feeling and then let it go. Avoiding pseudo spirituality. This is big. There is so much pseudo spirituality in the New Age. All this channeling, all this love and light, all the prophecies, all the downloads, all the stuff. But honestly, a lot of that stuff is just wasting your time and taking your attention away from reality and truth. That's how it is in this world. So avoid pseudo spirituality, avoid illusion, avoid ungrounded spirituality and ungrounded teachers. How do we find ungrounded teachers? Often ungrounded teachers are just trying to make money, and it's very obvious. Often ungrounded teachers are, very sensational. You can just sense that something's off after a while. If you're listening to them and your life isn't changing, these are ungrounded teachers. Avoiding practitioners who do not guard the space. So if you go to ceremonies of any sort, you want to go to ceremonies where people are very responsible and very serious about guarding the space. Facing your trials and tribulations, not running away from them. Having integrity with your words. So if you say you're going to be somewhere, be there. That also creates relational architecture, that you are a being that can be trusted. Prayer and devotion, having a practice, whatever that looks like to you. That practice can change, but a few moments of the day where you are going within, or many moments of the day where you are going within. Attention to lunar cycles, understanding the different phases of the moon and how they affect us and how we can work with them. If you're a woman, attention to your menstrual cycle and understanding how to work with that, the different phases of the month and what you're good at or not so good at in a particular phase. Repetition with a particular deity or spirit being. This also creates positive relational architecture. So, if there is a spirit helper or a deity or an aspect of God that you resonate with, that makes you feel supported in your meditations or your prayer or your practice with your altar, connecting as often as possible. The more we connect, the more we create that relational architecture in the invisible realm, that we have the support of that spirit help when we need it. Avoiding too much time alone with anxious thoughts. Avoiding worrying about how things are going to turn out. Coming into alignment with natural forces. I mean, this is common sense to indigenous people or people that live on the land. Us Western people, we often just kind of like plow through the natural forces. When it's dark, when it's nighttime, start to quiet down, start to work with when the sun is out and just come into alignment with the natural cycles more often. Know your relationship with boundary, with other human beings, with media. The ability to say no very easily and very quickly if necessary. Know who your spirit help is. Know the directions, know that we are surrounded by forces that support us in different ways. And one thing that if you don't understand the esoteric directions, you might want to look them up. Shamanic directions. Some people work with the 7 directions. Some people work with the four directions. But when it's time to pray or time to meditate, time to sit with your altar, you might want to consider opening up the directions in a short practice. And that kind of places you at the center of the universe in your own room, in your own sitting, being supported by these aspects of reality that have been around since forever. So know the directions, know your vulnerabilities. It's so important to know our vulnerabilities because then we can really watch out for those parts of ourselves. And know your offerings. I recommend making offerings to the earth. This has changed my life. It changes your own mindset. It creates more relational architecture to the element of earth, making you feel more supported because we can use all the grounding we can get. If we are experiencing any type of psychic invasion, The element we need to connect with most is earth. So some people find that it's supportive for them to sit on earth or walk barefoot. That doesn't work that well for some people. So making offerings is one way of connecting with the earth. Okay, so when we're feeling really weak and we feel like we're vulnerable to invasive thoughts, we feel like we're definitely vulnerable to suggestions from other people, we're vulnerable to nightmares. There are some very practical physical things to do. So if this is you, take a note of some of these things and try them out. The first thing is to get in the sunlight. So sunlight strengthens our aura. Sunlight strengthens our aura. So even if it's cold, if you can go out for a walk and get some sun, that's going to strengthen your aura. Taking a hot bath or putting your feet in a hot water bath, this draws the blood from the upper chakras, the upper part of the body down. It draws the focus and the energy from the upper chakras, which are like obviously very involved in psychic phenomena, down into a grounding place. And in some of my hardest times, taking a hot bath before bed, bonus if you want to throw in some Epsom salts, this has been a game changer for me and just shifted my perspective so much. Not fasting, but eating every 2 hours if you're in a really bad place is good. You might want to consider some heavier foods. And also keeping your bowels empty. I know it sounds funny, but Dion Fortune talks about keeping your bowels empty. There's something energetically where your root chakra feels more blocked if your bowels are kind of like full, especially for a longer period of time. This is kind of like TMI, but there have been times where I was in a bad place and I emptied my bowels and I suddenly felt totally grounded. I suddenly felt totally better. So don't underestimate those things. So these are not going to solve your problems, but these are going to help alleviate symptoms during a bad time. Also, our solar plexus, which is always kind of like taking in energy and like sensing stuff, can become really sensitive and have tension during psychic invasion. So having a hot water bottle or a heating pad can be a tremendous help during these kind of difficult times. So these things are just going to like reduce the symptoms so that you can regroup and ground a little bit better. Okay, now we're going to jump into some of the work of Gigi Young, and this will just explain a little bit about the dimensions, explain a little bit about the energy shifts of the dimensions that are happening when we are experiencing psychic invasion. So just kind of listen along, see what you resonate with, and then we're going to go through a few really practical practices that she recommends for when you're in a pinch. When, your aura has maybe not been so strong and you're finding yourself in a really dark, difficult place and you're like, I need some emergency help. So we're going to start off with the dimensions. We're obviously in the third dimension, the physical dimension, most of the time. And then we've got the fourth dimension, or the astral realm, which is all around us in the invisible world that we are mostly not experiencing unless we have super sensible gifts. So there is the lower astral realm, which is the realm of trauma, unhealed wounds, the realm of negative entities, the realm of nightmares and creepy experiences. There is the middle astral, which I like to think of as a place for like dreams that are illuminating, reflection, healing, understanding, and getting higher perspective and insight on issues we've got. The middle astral can be like a mirror realm of lessons learned. It's not a bad place, it's not a good place, but it's like an expansive place. Upper astral being more the realm of healing and angels and spirit guides and dreams where you wake up in the morning and you feel great. You feel so energized even if you don't remember your dream. You've probably visited the upper astral. All of that is contained in the fourth dimension, or astral realm. Beyond that, we have like higher and higher dimensions, The best way to understand how things work in those higher dimensions, the higher you get, it's nearly impossible to have individuality. So when people talk about having like spirit guides from like the 12th dimension or whatever, that's not really possible because there's so much non-duality up there, and not individuality like we know it. But what can happen is energy or insight from higher realms than the 4D, than the astral realm, higher, like say, for example, like the 7th dimension or the 6th dimension. There are angels and beings and forces and kind of non-individual help that can kind of at times step itself down to appear to us in the 4D, to appear to us in the astral realm to help us out, and temporarily come into an individual appearance of a spirit guide, an individual appearance of a spirit helper, but we'll go back to its home in the higher dimensions, if that makes sense. And that takes some effort and some work, just the same way as it takes us effort and work to kind of switch from the physical, being aware of the physical 3D dimension, to being aware of the astral dimension. So the 4th dimension, or the astral, is our working dimension. And nightmares and creepy experiences, that is where they happen. So Gigi Young talks about hell. I'm saying hell in quotes because it's not a place of everlasting punishment. But the idea of hell or purgatory makes a lot more sense when we think about it as just the lower astral, where it's the realm of our unchecked feelings and our unprocessed memories, that we deal with, sometimes in our dreams, sometimes in ceremonies, sometimes in the afterlife, right? But it's temporary. And anytime we are unkind to ourselves, anytime that we are not living from a place of love for ourselves, we can find ourselves more susceptible to forces from that lower astral plane. We can find that we are piercing our own aura and connecting with beings or thought forms from the lower astral plane. So we've got to really understand that lower astral plane, that 4th dimension, as a realm that we don't really want to spend time in, that we want to do whatever we can to strengthen our aura, strengthen our psychic body, so that we don't have to spend time there, so that it's not necessary. And if we do, it's very quick and temporary, and we understand that we are just letting go of trauma there, but we're not sticking around. So people who have never really felt kindness toward themselves, people who have not really treated themselves lovingly, it's not because they're bad people. I've spent much of my life in that place. Often this happens because when we were children, the care that was given to us was very imperfect. That's just the way things are. This is the world we were born into. It's not because our parents are evil. Sometimes they are. But for the most part, we were not given the self-esteem and the care and we were not mirrored love. We came in as love. We came in as, innocent, but we were mirrored back stuff that our parents had picked up along the way to their own adulthood. And so we were kind of like, bleh. A lot of darkness and low self-esteem and non-acceptance and abuse was kind of put onto us, and we've been carrying it around, right? And so then when we start to take this journey back to home, back to heaven, back to love, we find that we're dealing with all these projections that were kind of given to us just by being born on earth. And so people who have never really felt and experienced unconditional, benevolent, supportive love in an ongoing basis by authority figures can be more susceptible to the lower astral plane, to nightmares and invasive thoughts. That's just the way it is. And so this video is for those people. That has been my life experience anyways, because we need to understand what's happened and how we can change that. And learning to have kindness towards ourselves and love ourselves and the screaming baby part of ourself learn how to soothe that part of ourself is going to be one of the greatest ways that we build up our aura. So this is really actually all about loving ourselves. And when it comes to scary experiences and creepy experiences from the lower astral plane, these are usually just experiences that are meant to shock us. It's normal to be shocked. It's normal to be initially frightened if you have a nightmare. It's normal to be initially frightened if you have invasive thoughts or any kind of psychic invasion or intrusion. There is nothing to feel shameful about. We want to feel the shock and we want to move on. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what to do now that we understand the realm that is around us and the entities that live there and kind of what they're all about. Shock, really. What can we do for ourselves? So we have often felt like victims in one way or another, right? And beyond the fourth dimension, beyond the lower astral, up into the higher fourth dimension, the higher astral, even beyond that, in let's call it fifth dimensional consciousness. It's not a place, it's a way of being. There's no victims. Any victims that used to be victims, by the time they get there, they are empowered. Any predators that used to be predators, by the time they get there, they are sovereign. They have no need to bully and control and manipulate other people. So there's no victim and there's no predator. There's just sovereign beings. There's just beings that are kind to themselves and kind to other people. There aren't problems there with gaslighting and narcissism and manipulation. And so if we are still in a victim mindset, we are naturally going to be attracting experiences from the lower astral plane. If we are in an empowered self-kindness, self-loving perspective, we are not a match any longer for any of those entities. There's nothing that they can do to us. They can't even see us. So true healing and true working with a super strong aura, it involves a heart activation from scratch. So it takes a real warrior to be able to sit there when they're feeling frightened and off balance and maybe overtired. It takes a real warrior to be able to put their hand on their heart and to feel loving kindness towards themselves, to feel a soft glow, to feel a sense of awe and wonder and gratitude and safety. And so when a person can learn how to go from a really low state of being and switch into this heart consciousness of peace and let that peace and that gratitude and that sacred feeling saturate their whole body, like all around like an egg. So we're not actually protecting ourselves from anything on the outside. What we're doing is we're buzzing and vibrating so fast with so much love and warmth that we're not in the same realm as anything. It can't even notice us or see us or be attracted to us. And then what can I do beyond creating that feeling, creating that sensation from scratch? What can I do for myself today? Do I need to call in sick? Do I need to declutter my house and have some respect for myself and my space? Do I need a hot bath? Do I need some nourishing food? Do I need to put on some really comfy clothes that feel really soft on my skin? Like, what do I need to do to show myself self-kindness? And then I do those things. And then I ask the question again, is there anything else that you need? It's like talking to a little child who's rattled, right? And so this is how we do it. This is how we elevate beyond the lower fourth dimension so that those intrusive thoughts and those invasive energies cannot even see us, can't even touch us. So when we learn how to create peaceful emotions from scratch, that's when we start to become beyond victim and predator. We become beyond that. We are now a sovereign being. The more often that we can live like that in our everyday life, the less and less any of these lower things can approach us. So we want our heart's energy to become dominant. This is not walking around loving everybody. Oh, I love you, like I'm going to do everything for you. I'm going to fix you. Not at all. This is about saturating ourselves with that so that anyone who comes into contact with us is positively affected and they are uplifted too, but we're not doing it for them. Yeah. So there are a few different things that we can do if we are in a pinch. So we've talked for a long time about building a stronger aura and learning how to create peaceful, loving emotions from scratch, which is a practice. But sometimes we are not able to do that. If you cannot create peaceful, loving emotions for yourself from scratch when you're in a pinch, can you access neutrality? A place of neutrality and surrender. Because even that will elevate you. Even that will elevate you. And then in a pinch, there are some visualizations that we can do. Visualizations, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. When they do work, it's because we are latching on to the feeling of the visualization. So we can visualize all we want, but if we aren't feeling any different while we visualize, it's not going to have an effect. So I'm going to read out a couple of visualizations, and you might want to take note of any that resonate with you, that you're thinking, yeah, I feel that. That's something that could work for me because I feel that. I feel the power of that. Some work for some people and some for other people. So that's why it's good to find what is yours. So visualizing, I love this, by the way. This is one of mine from Gigi Young that I love, is visualizing like almost like smoke, pink and green smoke coming from your chest. Really beautiful looking, beautiful smelling smoke that's the color of the heart chakra, and that smoke is just billowing around you. And you can't see anything but this beautiful smoke, and nothing can see you. If they see anything, they see this beautiful protective smoke. And it keeps going and it keeps going. And if you have anxiety in your heart, that is something that can really alleviate the anxiety. If you can really feel into, like, almost, can you smell that? Because it smells beautiful. Imagine it like a beautiful smell of incense. So that's a good visualization. Sound works for some people. So we can generate a change of frequency with sound if we are somebody who resonates working with sound. So using like the om, and over using om, and we're kind of coming back to our center. And by doing that om, we are forcing anything that is in our field to come into alignment with the om, with the primordial sound. And so this is not about like protecting ourselves or fighting something. This is about bringing everything in our room, in our immediate field, into resonance. And it has to go, because anything that is not within that resonance is going to have to go. You might be somebody who can sing. There are protection songs. If you know any protection songs, that's great too, to use your voice. So if you're a sound person, to work with sound. There is a flaming ring or a flaming wheel that you can imagine going up and down your body, made of flames all around. And it just goes up and down your body, so that anything that is not welcome by you stays outside. Again, you're going to have to feel this for it to work. And there is a mirrored eggshell. So imagining yourself inside of an eggshell with lots of mirrors on the outside that's just reflecting back anything that's there, reflecting it away from you so that nothing can see you. Anything that, wants to be in your field, it just has to look at itself, really. And it's kind of like the energy is kind of sent back to the owner. Yeah. And in a real pinch, like when you can't even get yourself to those visualizations, because I've been in that place where it's just really scary and really dark, and I can't even get myself to a visualization. Calling on Christ, calling on Christ, calling on Archangel Michael, because these are the most powerful forces that we can call on, that can help us when we are feeling lost in dark astral places, when we are feeling lost with being bombarded by something that doesn't belong to us, and saying, only the presence and energy of Christ is welcome here. All else must go. And sometimes we, if we are going through initiations and we're going through inner battles, sometimes that's all we can do, and that is okay. And I know a lot of people are going to relate to that. But it really does come back to prevention and building up our aura in day-to-day life, so that we never have to find ourselves at that point, so that we've never fallen to that point where we're in such like a serious pinch. And lastly, Dion Fortune talks about when we're wanting to reduce fear, if we have found ourselves in a place that is just like chronically fearful and it's been going on for days and days, that can really weaken us. And it can be hard to figure out how to get out of that if you've been in it for a long time. It can affect your sleep. We can become weakened from a loss of sleep. And she talks about having any prayers, songs, or images from your childhood religion. And I'm not talking about, dogmatic stuff or fundamentalist stuff. Any elevated, uplifting aspects of your childhood religion that are beyond duality, those things can actually be very soothing and calming. And, I've mentioned before, I grew up Christian, in a dogmatic Christian situation that has taken a lot to heal from the darker aspects of that. However, Jesus Christ and the loving words that he had to share and speak is not something that I would ever leave, because those things have had profound impacts on me. So whatever it might be for you, if you grew up with a childhood religion and there is a elevated aspect of that, as far as a prayer, a song, a deity, an image, these are things that can help ground us back to a place of safety. It's really about creating safety for yourself at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's really about creating a lot of kindness for yourself, for your inner child, for the screaming baby part of you. We are always going to be susceptible to invasion the longer we treat ourselves with the type of lack of care or disrespect that we were given as children. If we're going to perpetuate and repeat that was given to us, we are going to continue on with a really weak aura. And we don't have time for that. This is our time for healing. This is our time for coming back to the best version of ourselves and letting go of all that lack of care, that lack of understanding, that lack of respect that was overlaid onto us, the insecurities of our parents that just kind of fell our way, probably very unconsciously. If we're going to perpetuate that, then we're going to continue to have psychic invasion. And so finding out how you can be kind to yourself in a unique way, it might look different than anybody else, but carving out a place for yourself in this world, in this universe, where you are safe and where your inner child is being heard and listened to and tended to, like checking in with that inner child. The funniest things my inner child has said to me, the funniest things that she needs. Like sometimes she needs me to buy her a book. I was really like a booky kid. Like I loved reading books. And when I checked in with my inner child not too long ago, I was like, what do you need? Like you're struggling. Like I can tell you don't feel well. Like how can I make you feel more supported? She wanted a book. So, like, this is unconventional stuff, right? Like, convention didn't really get us anywhere, but to this really unhealed place, right? And so, if you need to sleep for 24 hours, if you need to buy a book, I don't know what it is that you need to do. I can only speak for myself, but I want you to get, unconventional in your self-kindness and your self-care so that you can build up that aura, you can build up that psychic body. And if you're in that low place, if you're in that frightened place where you're getting creeped out really easily, this is really, really important for you to like put a stop on anything in your life that's unnecessary, to really scale back, to start saying no and canceling stuff and taking your sanity, taking your peace really seriously, because no one's going to do it for you. You've got to get really radical as far as this self-care and self-kindness. And we don't heal in busyness. We don't heal when we're running around. We don't heal when we're attending to everyone else's needs but our own. We heal in stillness. We heal in silence. We heal in a place of neutrality where we're not giving out a bunch and we're not taking in too much. So yeah, I wish you well. I know that these things are powerful when used in combination. It's not any one of these techniques, but it's really about building up that preventative aura over the long term, and your life will change. Your life will change with the combination of these things, but it takes a lot. It takes everything that we've got to be really kind to ourselves if we've been overlaid with something else. Yeah, but there's no reason for you to be stuck long term in the lower astral plane. There's no reason to be stuck there, revisiting and reopening creepy situations. That is something that you can definitely rise out of with the activation of your heart, with creating peaceful, loving feelings from scratch, and getting into that way of being more often throughout the day so that you're just not really a match for these kind of invasions. That's all I've got. Thank you for being here. Thank you for liking and commenting, and journey well.